Welcome back to the Superhero Ethics Podcast. This is part 2 of our discussion with Paul Hoppe about all things Batman. Let's get into that last topic then, which is the Joker. He is, Batman's primary adversary, and he obviously plays a huge role in the movie we just saw, or we separately, but both saw
right.
The Killing Joke. But obviously is a huge part of the Nolan trilogy and some of the other things. Why do you think the Joker is such an important part of the Batman story?
I mean, I think because he's such an inverse and such sort of an unexpected villain,
yeah.
I think, for such a serious seeming hero.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you have a hero that's so serious and so dark, and it's like when you have a villain who's making fun of that.
Yeah,
like,
the Heath Ledger line, "Why so serious?"
Exactly.
Exactly that.
Spot on impersonation.
Thank you.
But it's and there's so many different Joker versions, sort of different takes on the Joker. Like, the Jack Nicholson Joker I thought was fantastic when I saw it, and he's this like gangster Joker, There's the Mark Hamill Joker, who's my favorite Joker, who very often I think is like a sad clown Joker,
right.
Who's like really creepy and funny and like sad but sort of cheerful. It's just he strikes so many different notes. And then you have the Heath Ledger Joker, who's this anarchist Joker, and I mean, I even liked the Cesar Romero Joker back in the the TV show, and it's just I think it's a character that can kind of reflect Batman's darkness in Batman's this one fighting for good and justice, and he's wearing all black and he's serious, and meanwhile Joker's he wants to kill people, He's like, I'm the first fully functioning homicidal artist. I make art till someone dies. And he's all purely white-faced and colorful suit and making jokes. And so it's it's just, to me, it's the juxtaposition but at the same time, how they're very much sort of two sides of a coin, and they're both pretty crazy in their own ways, right? And how Joker basically gets to constantly point out really how crazy Batman is, but sort of not, you know.
And I think that's the Killing Joke. I admit I had a lot of problems with, and I know you and I disagree with. On some level, I hated the whole Barbara story and thought it was really kind of sexist. But that's a whole other topic that we can get into some other time. But to me, what I loved about that movie, especially after I thought about it more after talking with you about it, is that it really highlights the idea that on some level, Batman's kind of a dick to to Batgirl and to the rest of his team.
Yeah.
Joker's kind of the only one who's his equal at this point, or not even his equal, but who he almost has more respect for Joker than he does for Barbara. And part of it I think is because Joker is a little bit right about Joker gets him.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's the whole one bad day thing, and whether one bad day can turn anyone into the Joker, and that's kind of his premise, right? But his thesis statement that he's trying to prove. But he knows Batman already had that bad day,
right? And
he's not oh, you're gonna turn into me if you have one more bad day. He's you are me,
right?
You just don't get it, the joke's on you, that this good and evil, law and order, law, chaos, that's irrelevant. Look at us, we're bloody flipped.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's almost like going back before. I'm really glad that Schumacher never tried to put a Joker into his world.
Oh,
because I kind of think the whole point is that when Batman is this dark and serious,
the Joker
is there to make fun of him in the world. Now, what
Right.
Schumacher did is Schumacher just made it's basically. Here's a fun way to look at it.
Batman was making fun of himself in the Schumacher.
Well,
work.
no. What if you just assume the Schumacher movies are written and directed by Joker? Like,
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
how would
Well
Joker
played.
tell the Batman story? He'd put nipples on the damn suit. Like, that's what Joker would do. This is actually an idea I really like. I'm going to try and run with this now.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. That's like the the idea that the old that the 3 Star Wars prequels are like propaganda put out by the rebellion or something. Or,
Oh, I haven't heard that, but I kind of like
I
it.
forget the exact claim, but it's good. And then that the newer trilogy is propaganda put out by someone else, and but I don't know.
Okay. I
You
like
know,
it.
It's
I like
good.
it.
It's good. But yeah, I think this in the Killing Joke, Batman's like totally a dick to someone who's like, I want to help you do the thing that's most important to you
Right.
in the world. And he's like super nice to the guy who's like, I want to kill all your friends and destroy the earth.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's not literally his plan, the destroy the earth part, but like, he's like really nice to the Joker.
Yeah.
No,
No, he clearly has more respect for the Joker than he does for Barbara.
well, I don't really. Okay. What I would say is that I think he thinks that Barbara is fine on her own,
Uh-huh.
and he's like, "You do you." And with the Joker, he's like, "You need my help."
Right.
And so, and that's the thing is that people who are doing kind of okay, like Batman's just like, "Yeah, whatever, go ahead, proceed."
Uh-huh.
It's people who are really, really on the edge of despair and destruction, and whether they're the perpetrators of that or the victims of it, those are kind of like the only people he's interested in.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
mean, I don't see it quite the same way because I do think, like, even before she is shot, like,
Yeah.
to me, Barbara is not doing as well as that, and it's mostly Batman's fault. But that's, again, I know that's a whole other rabbit hole. But I do think you're basically right, and maybe it even goes back to the Dick Grayson thing. That in some, Batman sees in Joker, not that he's going to ever make Joker his sidekick, but that he sees a little bit of, I looked at this abyss, Dick Grayson looked at this abyss, the Joker has looked at this abyss.
Yeah.
And so there's a connection there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as far as I'm aware, Barbara hasn't really had the same abyss.
Right.
Like, she has a, like, I want to fight crime because, like, that seems like a cool thing to do, The reason that, like, any random person who's like, you know what, maybe I'll become a cop, like, becomes a cop. As opposed to, like, my father was killed by Rollo Tomasi, or by a random guy and I called him Rollo Tomasi, so I decided to become a cop, or I was chained to a radiator and watched my dad beat my mom to death, so I decided to become a cop to, like, protect.
These are both, by the way, references to L.A. Confidential. Anyone who hasn't seen that movie, it is a fantastic movie, but it's also another really good. I mean, to me, in a lot of ways, it's the same kind of issues of Batman because it's all about, are you doing this out of vengeance? Are you doing this are you fighting criminals or are you fighting crime?
Yeah.
And when is it okay to break the law to fight crime?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely dovetails into that whole conversation really well, which is why I dovetailed it in.
Well done. But I do think you're right, and I think there's a part of me that feels like Barbara Gordon was really underserved by the writers.
Yeah.
To some extent in Killing Joke, but also just overall that, like, she doesn't have a really cool origin story the way the others do.
Right.
And I think there's something kind of problematic there. But once you accept that in this world, I still think Batman's kind of a dick to her, but not kind of, but you can understand.
No, he's a dick.
Yeah,
but there's no.
But the reasoning for it, I think you're right. It's that he doesn't see her as having that need that he sees in the Joker, and I'll admit it's why the first time I watched the movie, I've now seen it a second time. The first time I watched it, the end didn't make any sense to me because I was expecting something else. I think
Right.
the movie had gotten so hyped up, and there's a whole other conversation we can have about movie hype.
Yes.
But
yes, there is.
I thought there was going to be a final act in which we saw that Gordon really had been driven crazy and he was now going to attack Batman. So the ending just came out of nowhere to me, and I still don't like it. But what I did love is, like you said, Joker is constantly trying to get through to Batman, and the fact that he makes him laugh, is, to me, that is such a breakthrough moment. Because I don't think we've ever, Alfred makes him chuckle from time to time, but it's not the same thing. And I think that's such an interesting moment.
Yeah, it's kind of like at the end of the story, Joker wins.
Yeah.
Like not what he was trying to do necessarily, but like, and at the same time, it's also like Batman wins, where he's, like Joker's like, no, we're not gonna like do this thing where I become your Hannibal Lecter or whatever. But because I think that's kind of like what Batman had in mind.
Yeah.
Like we could work together. Like you could tell me how these crazy people think, But it's like, well, what I would do is, but it's, it is kind of a moment of restorative justice, which like you don't see a lot of in comic books.
Yeah.
And it's at the very least, it's like a first step. It's like well, all right, maybe this isn't going to work out at all, but like they're trying in a way that like you don't really see very much, and when Joker's like, go ahead, beat the crap out of me, get your standing ovation, like, and that is like, that's what a lot of people want to see, and it's, to me, the story is just like, no, that's not what we're giving you. That's, because that's not like, Batman isn't going to just beat the crap out of somebody because like they did something wrong, he's going to beat the crap out of someone to stop them from doing something wrong. But then once they're done, it's like, all right, we're done.
And it's to me, if you ever want me to hashtag not my Joker, it's going to be the time I see Joker use martial arts, he might have a gun sometimes, but the Joker is never in any way, shape, or form a physical match for Batman. I mean, it is so clear that if Batman ever corners Joker, Joker's done. There is no physical fight between the two that's going to be in any way like a classic fight scene.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because I think it's another way that the Joker is the foil to Batman, because it's like, if we're going again with that idea that Batman has this ability to physically fight anybody, but really that's not his thing. His thing is he can outsmart people.
Yeah.
That's who the Joker, and to some extent also the Riddler, both of them are. They just want to battle Batman in a game of wits, not in ever a physical fight.
Yeah. And I mean, even Penguin too is, Penguin's more of a money gangsterish kind of thing, and he's got his like trick umbrellas or whatever. But like, it's interesting how few of Batman's principal adversaries are these physical matches for him. They're often more putting him to a test of, the intellect, which I've been disappointed by basically every Riddler story, just about that I've ever seen, where I feel like I really want to see a great Riddler story.
Yes.
Where I don't know, with like real riddles instead of like things that are like, what? Like, I mean, I'd like to have an example off the top of my head, but it's like, well, 12 is the, they just have these crazy...
I feel like Gotham's Riddler is the closest to that. I mean, certainly miles better than Jim Carrey. I think Jim Carrey's Riddler, with the exception of Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze, is the worst Batman villain portrayal I've ever seen. But and so there isn't really a high bar, but I do think that the Gotham Riddler is decent, not fantastic, but at least
I actually really like the portrayal. It's just we haven't really gotten Riddler versus Batman. I mean, maybe a little tease, but because we don't really have Batman yet, right? But yeah, that's the Riddler that I have the most hope for. But I feel like what if the writers of Sherlock wrote Riddler?
Right.
Like write him like Moriarty, basically, because he should be. I mean, we had a conversation a while ago about how the Moriarty in the Sherlock show is kind of like the Joker, right?
Yeah.
but like he's also kind of like Riddler.
Yeah.
And like there's an extent to which Riddler and Joker are kind of like a little bit the same character.
Yeah, and
certain,
especially I feel like
where they could have been the same character, but they're not.
When I watch the Batman the Animated Series, they feel very distinct.
Right.
Jim Carrey feels like he's trying to be, just the wild and crazy Joker, but playing some fun games, kind of Riddler.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because they are very similar, and you have to work hard to make them distinct.
I agree.
And we just haven't seen that happen yet.
I would like to see a Batman Beyond movie with Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne and the Riddler as the main villain.
I could see that. I would like to see that.
Because, like, old Riddler could still be, fun, a match. Because, like, whatever, it's just his brain, right?
Well, and I'm just thinking in terms of that the question of who are the people who are physical matches for Batman in his rogues gallery. Catwoman is the first that comes to mind. Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah. And like all of the League of Assassins.
Yeah, all the League of Assassins. Killer Croc.
Yeah. And
is Grundy a Batman villain or is Grundy more a Superman villain?
I'm not sure.
He comes up from time to time.
Yeah, he definitely is in both, but I'm not sure actually of his origin.
But yeah, other than those, pretty much all the Batman rogues are much more like, if Batman has to beat up their henchmen, but Batman's probably not going to have to beat them up.
Right, exactly. It's like he needs to stop the bomb, then he beats up the henchman, stops the bomb, and he's like, all right, you're coming with me. They're like, oh, you got me. Let's go back to Arkham.
Yep, exactly.
See you next time I break out, and
I think that's... there's obviously a tension because fight scenes sell movies. I mean, that's what people want to see.
Yeah, yeah.
And yet, but obviously Sherlock is super. People love Sherlock on BBC.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why we don't have a Sherlock, big budget movie.
Oh
no, actually, well, I didn't see.
So we did.
But my understanding is that in both of those, Sherlock is more of an action hero.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, it was like, let's make a Sherlock Holmes action movie, which actually I thought were good.
Yeah.
Particularly the first one, I'd say I liked better than the second. There were things about the second one that,
but my only point being that I think that's part of why, and this is unfortunate, but it's part of why when you make a big budget Batman movie, you don't expect that the audience wants to see Batman the detective. You're expecting they want to see Batman with the cool toys who's the action hero.
Which is why I think a Batman live-action TV show would be really interesting.
Huh.
Like, where he could be mostly a detective. There'd be some action like there is on Arrow or The Flash or whatever, but it wouldn't have to center on it as much because you wouldn't have as much budget. People wouldn't expect it as much on TV. And, you have detective shows on television.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's...
that are just detective shows.
Yeah, and Batman's basically the best CSI detective that the world's ever seen. So he'd be amazing at that kind of stuff.
Exactly. I think that would be really interesting. And I looked it up. Grundy apparently was introduced as an enemy of Green Lantern.
Oh, okay.
But like one of the early Green Lanterns, Alan Scott. So.
Right.
But he's a prominent enemy for Superman and Batman. Yeah. So
and
he's not either, but both.
And he's also, I think, a case where Batman will physically fight him when needed, but also spends a lot of time sympathizing with him.
Yeah, he tries to talk to him. He's like, "Hey, Grundy."
Yeah. So, okay, we should wrap up, but let me close by asking you, your top 3 Batmen. Who are they, and why?
You mean portrayals, like actors?
Yes. Actors / writers.
Oh, well, so in terms of actors, I'd say number 1, Kevin Conroy, the voice of the animated series and the Justice League and through the Killing Joke movie. Number 2 is Michael Keaton.
Well, so why each of them? Why the Kevin Conroy?
The Kevin Conroy it's a combination of his voice is just perfect.
Yeah.
He conveys, he sounds badass when he needs to, but he also manages to convey this really sort of dry wit that's like sort of all of the kind of contempt that Batman has for people not really being able to figure things out, but also sort of his compassion, determination. Like he just completely, I think, gets the character from the ground up. And
I will say what I love about him as well is that he's able to have two very distinct voices between Bruce Wayne and Batman. Yes. Without all the growl nonsense of the Christian Bale movies.
Yes.
And I love Christian Bale as Batman, but I hate that growl. And I love...
Especially in The Dark Knight. It was... even he said, in The Dark Knight I overdid it.
Yeah. And what I love is that in the Kevin Conroy, it is two very... you could close your eyes and immediately know, is he Bruce or is he Batman right now?
Totally.
And he doesn't need that. So, I'm with... so who's number two? You said Michael Keaton?
Yeah. Well, but just to go with the Kevin Conroy Batman, just one more thing. That's the one Batman that I feel like really fully captures the intelligence and detective work of Batman.
Yes, absolutely.
And then number two is Michael Keaton. I just think his, like, I'm Batman. That's like the best Batman line ever.
Yes.
Like, just the way he delivers it. It's... Because, like, he's just like, I'm Batman. And then in Batman Forever, it's like, I'm Batman. And it's like, okay, then that's, Val Kilmer. And then, like, George Clooney's all like, hey, I'm Batman. How you doing? Let's be friends.
Yeah,
like,
it's so understated by Michael Keaton.
Right, exactly. Really like. And I just think the thing that Michael Keaton did in particularly the first Tim Burton movie was Batman was threatening and, like, scary and, like, had that, and obviously looking back at it 30 years later, it doesn't quite feel the same way, but at that point in time, in a movie, like, it felt, it was different from the character of, like, other superhero or even just, like, action hero things that, like, we would have seen, but he also captured the sadness of Bruce Wayne, in a way that, there's this one scene where he's, like, walking on the steps of maybe City Hall or a courthouse or something, and the Joker's men are, like, shooting people, and he just has this, like, look on his face, like this kid who's like, I don't understand why they're doing this.
Yeah.
And, like, sort of that feeling that, like, looking at the senseless violence and just being like, what? And just kind of being lost. And then he goes and he puts on the bat suit and he does Batman stuff, but to be able to kind of capture that's kind of that whole essence of the character that he captured and Tim Burton captured it, helped him capture it. It's in the script and it's in the filmmaking and it's in the performance. And so I think that right behind Kevin Conroy, they really capture kind of the complexity of Batman and how he's more than just like an action hero.
Right.
And then number three is Christian Bale. I mean, I like the Dark Knight trilogy less and less as time goes on, but really that's just because I'm harder and harder on it.
Right.
It's when Batman Begins came out, I loved it, and then after seeing the next movie and then going back and watching it, like, it didn't hold up as much for me, but it's like, I like that it's a very real world, right? Kind of very grounded. And, I think Christian Bale does the Bruce Wayne, like, hey, I'm here with these models and we're going to go swimming in the pool and it's okay, I bought the hotel. Like, I feel like he portrays the, like, fake Bruce Wayne well.
Yeah.
And then he can also be brooding and, like, his Batman's badass and does Batman stuff. And, he doesn't want to kill people. He's like, but I don't have to save you. It's like, I feel like that Batman is Batman. And the movies are very well made. And so if the other two weren't, if I didn't hold them in as high esteem as I do, then, that one could have been number one. But It's just that there are a number of different really great Batman portrayals.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty similar. I used to say that the Christian Bale is my favorite Batman, and there's still an extent to which I hated The Dark Knight Rises, but the first Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, I think, are my favorite Batman stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I have come to think that I think Kevin Conroy is a better I mean, he's just so, all the things you said, he's so definitive for what Batman truly is. Um, and I think I said to you once, I feel like Christian Bale is my favorite Bruce Wayne.
Mm,
But Kevin Conroy is my favorite Batman
right.
because he also gets that idea of it's. I feel like the more I thought about it, again, this was pointed out by the guys from that DC On Screen podcast. It is that it the Christopher Nolan movies. It feels like the character is Bruce Wayne, who is struggling and still trying to decide if he does or doesn't want to have this alternate identity of Batman. You
Yes.
know, and that there's this the whole third movie is about him trying to go away from Batman because
Hmm.
of his love dying and all this kind of stuff. And I think that's an interesting story, but it's not Batman. And
Yeah.
and to me, Kevin Conroy gets it so good. My third though, and this surprised me because I didn't think I would like it as much, but I think is actually it's Reno Romano, who's the guy who plays the voice of Batman on the Batman, that other
Yeah.
animated show.
Yeah.
Um, it's a much younger portrayal. It's Batman as kind of a guy in his early 20s. He's clearly like just setting out to be Batman.
Yeah. It's
Um,
like Batman Year Two, basically, right? Or Year
yeah,
Three. It's like
yeah,
not
exactly.
Batman Year One, but it's just a little while after that.
And there's a more modern sensibility to him, which I really like.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways, what it often feels like is that he's more playful, but it's
Hmm.
it's so forced. You know, he
Oh,
captures that idea of he's forcing it
yeah.
in almost that same kind of because to hide the pain. Um,
Yeah.
and I will also say, and this again, it's the rip at Snyder. That show does the Batman Superman conflict so much better than Snyder does. Like it gets it
Oh,
right in a way
yeah.
that
Yeah.
just makes it. And that's loving the story more than the Batman, but that got me. So
That makes sense. I actually want to throw in an honorable mention.
uh huh.
Um, Will Friedle,
I have no idea
who,
who that is.
yeah, because he doesn't play Bruce Wayne. He plays Terry McGinnis,
Oh,
who
okay.
I actually really love as Batman. Like as and I did like The Dark Knight Rises. I didn't love it, but I liked it more than the vast majority of people, I'd say, who saw it.
Right.
And the thing I liked most about it was Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character,
Yeah.
who, like, at the end, they kind of clumsily were like, he's Robin, you know? But, like, he's not Robin. He's Batman.
Right.
Like, that, you know, I mean, we don't know what happens after The Dark Knight Rises,
Uh huh.
but the last scene of the movie is literally him on a platform rising,
Yeah.
and then it says The Dark Knight Rises, like the title of the movie, you know? So it's like, they have a statue for Batman, like, being dead or whatever, and they have this little, like, 4-person ceremony of, like, Bruce Wayne's, like, tombstone, empty grave or whatever.
Uh huh.
But, like, I think it's pretty clear that he's gonna be the next Batman, you know?
Well, and I like the idea of it Batman almost being Zorro. You know, like
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
pass on the cowl, and someone
Right,
else.
exactly. And that's sort of what I like. I liked that a lot in The Dark Knight Rises, partially because I'd seen Batman Beyond and really like it a lot.
Uh-huh.
And you know, particularly like Return of the Joker, like the things outside the series itself, Return of the Joker, and within the Justice League series, there's that one Batman Beyond episode basically that they throw in as like an epilogue.
Yep.
The thing where Batman's sitting with Ace, and it's which is that's just great, that episode. But so I kind of, and that's kind of where I went from like really disliking the whole Robin Batgirl concept, you know, which came from really from the Schumacher films like Batman and Friends. You know, it's like really we got Batman and Robin and Batgirl, and like they're just making terrible jokes, but to like actually see kind of this, you know, Bruce Wayne as an old guy and kind of how he related to someone else who became the new Batman, and then that sort of shed light and a different kind of perspective for me on all the Robins and
Oh, that's good.
and Batgirl that came before.
Have you read? I know neither of us have read many comics, but have you read the story All of the Family?
All of the Family?
Yeah, it's a Batman
No.
comic
No,
called
Death of the Family? Or I haven't.
Okay, it may be called. No, I think it's All of the Family. Because I remember thinking it was All in the Family, but it might be Death. I will look that up in a second.
I mean, Death of the Family is definitely that's a thing.
Yeah.
That's a Batman arc.
Yes. No. Okay. Showing my high level of expertise. Yeah, it's the Death of the Family. Have you read that
Yeah.
one?
I haven't. I borrowed it from the library and then didn't read it.
I just finished. I actually read it after the Killing Joke because it's
Yeah.
a very similar story arc to Killing Joke.
Yeah, and it's around the same time that it
Yep.
was actually out, which is interesting.
And I haven't read the Killing Joke, but I will say I much prefer this story to at least the movie of Killing Joke.
Right.
But part of what I love about it is it here what Joker attacks. And I'll try not to spoil it for you, but just kind of this idea that what Joker attacks isn't the one bad day thing. It's he attacks the connections between Batman and his family.
Right, yeah.
And
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm aware of the basic story and the outcome, and within the movie of The Killing Joke, they clearly referenced Death of the Family.
Right.
You know, there was an image on his screen or whatever where that had happened, which I also feel like, so that's happened before, you know, the Bat Snyder movie, where, you know, if they'd shown that, like, maybe, honestly, I just think they just really messed up by deciding to try to turbo start, like, they just tried to fast forward into a franchise, into a, you know, the whole multiverse, not multiverse, but, you know, the kind of Uber franchise, right? And, like, I just think that was a huge mistake. And I think it's all Zack Snyder just being like, just like, seat of his pants, like, oh, how about if we make Batman the villain in the next Superman movie? And they're like, oh yeah, okay, that sounds like it would make money, you know?
Yeah. Well,
as opposed to like,
I would love to have you on as a guest again.
Yeah, that's a long conversation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I think there's a whole conversation just to be made about what's the difference between really trying to tell a story that is true to a work versus saying, hey, we need a blockbuster movie. Oh, let's use a Batman story, you know? And I think that's
right.
A lot of, and I will say, I think my understanding is the Killing Joke was, whatever else I thought of it, probably the truest film adaptation of a comic book that's ever been done. Would you agree with that?
I mean,
Watchmen
I haven't seen everyone ever made, but it's the most true to source material that I feel I've ever seen something. Yeah. I mean, it's very, I mean, it's interesting because the Tim Burton Batman movie, the first one, clearly pulls from The Killing Joke. Yeah. The Dark Knight clearly pulls from The Killing Joke, and Batman vs Superman clearly pulls from The Killing Joke. But like The Killing Joke, really, they just did The Killing Joke. You know, it's like, here's the story. They added a 30-minute prequel, right? Which I liked. I know you have your issues with it, and I disagree with most of them, and some of them maybe just don't really have any feelings on. I do. There are certainly things that I didn't like about it or thought could have been better. But it's, you know, I feel like they do a Batgirl story and she has agency, and then, you know,
we're going to agree to disagree there, but
sure.
Let me pull you back to your main point.
I don't understand how you can disagree that she has agency, but in the Killing Joke story, she clearly doesn't. I mean, she's just there to get shot, right? I mean, spoiler alert. But that it's just that story is just that story. And while they were like, okay, let's do a prologue to this to try to maybe mitigate some of the, actually, I mean, as much as anything, like, it's a 40-minute story, and they wanted to make a feature release length, you know, so they didn't stretch it out.
I wonder if, like, because I think you're right, like, the Tim Burton and the Christopher Nolan movies are by no means, you know, panel for panel, shot for shot adaptations of the comics, but they're very true to the comics in a lot of ways, in ways that I think the newest one is not, the Snyderverse is not. And part of that, I think, is just because Snyder is, you know, a terrible filmmaker, but it also feels to me like I love the MCU, and I love everything the MCU is creating. But I wonder if part of sort of the knock-on effect is it's creating this desire for studios to feel like they have to have a big franchise. Like you said, like I feel like part of what happened there is DC said we need to have our version of the MCU, so let's use Batman vs Superman to launch that, you know. And so it felt like a story that wasn't being told to tell the story. It, you know, clearly Batman Begins, they wanted to launch a trilogy. But in some ways that still feels different than trying to launch a franchise. I mean, it is a franchise, but it feels different.
No, there's a franchise and there's like a super franchise, basically.
Yeah.
You know, because what the MCU isn't a franchise. It's a collection of interlocking franchises, really.
Right.
You know, which then has become a large extended universe that reaches into television and, you know, video shorts and all sorts of stuff. Whereas, you know, the Dark Knight trilogy was, here are 3 movies that share continuity, 1, 2, 3, done.
Right.
You know, and you know, some people wanted them to make more. And I mean, I would have watched a Joseph Gordon-Levitt like Batman, you know, that took, you know, Nightwing movie basically or whatever. But I definitely think that they were just like, okay, let's try to catch up to Marvel.
Right.
You know, I think in some regard, and I think that was just a huge mistake. And I think a lot of the problems with Batman vs Superman, like aside from like interpretations of the characters, were also you know, weaknesses of Age of Ultron. You know, the second Avengers movie, where the first Avengers movie was like a capstone on the first, what was it, 5 Marvel movies, MCU movies that came before it.
Right.
Right. It was like, we're completing this, you know, and, you know, then maybe they have little teasers at the end, but throughout the movie, it was like the movie was there to tell the movie's story, period.
Right.
Whereas Age of Ultron was like, okay, we're going to try to bring all of these things before us together, but then we're also going to plant seeds for
Thor Ragnarok and
for
the
Phase
rest.
3, and the problem is then you're like trying to interact with like 10 different movies, you know, the 5 that came before, the 5 that are coming after, or 7 or whatever, 20 movies, and it's, you know, you have to make a 4-hour movie at that point, and Joss Whedon's like, no, I want to make a 2.5-hour movie. And it's like, well, if you're going to do that, you can't put all these seeds in, you know, and yet they did, and so it struggles with that. I still liked it better than I know you did, and better than a lot of people, but I mean, that was inarguably a weakness of the movie, for sure.
I think that's the perfect parallel to Batman vs Superman, because to me, like, that movie did a pretty good job. Okay, it's not the Batman you or I like by any means, but if its only job is to set up an independent Batman movie that is clearly in the same universe, okay, it did a decent job of that, just not a Batman I have any regard for. It did a very good job, I thought, of setting up the upcoming Wonder Woman movie, because it introduced Wonder Woman as a character, and because it didn't feel like they were just throwing a seed in, it felt like they were making it part of the story.
Yeah, she was a character in the movie that had some sort of relevance.
Right, and that now is going to have her own movie, which looks pretty damn good. What it did a terrible job of was setting up the Aquaman, Cyclops, and Flash movies, because those just felt like the most blatant. I mean, I kind of felt like it was almost like if I'd watched Age of Ultron and sort of groaned a little bit about setting up Ragnarok and the others, and then I would have watched Cyclops set up, and I'd be like, okay, it's not so bad. Not Cyclops, Cyborg. I mean, right,
Cyborg. Yeah,
because that was just, there was no story reason for that at all.
There wasn't. It was super, you know, it was just crowbarred into the story, you know, and it just didn't work. You know, it didn't work. Yeah. And then also they took all these peripheral characters and like pretended they were in the movie and then blew them up.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing that for? Like, aren't you trying to start a franchise? Like, are you killing off all these characters that are really pretty important, you know, to a lot of your stories? So it's not good.
Conclusion: as long as Zack Snyder never gets to touch a Batman movie again,
too late.
That's
Justice League coming out. Although they appointed Jeff Johns the new president of DC Entertainment or something. I don't know.
Well, and Snyder is not directing the Batman standalone movie, right?
Ben Affleck is.
Okay, so that I have a lot of respect for Ben Affleck, both as a writer, and, both as an actor and a director. So that gives me some hope.
Yeah, and a writer.
Um,
Good Will Hunting.
and if nothing else, Zack Snyder's not going to touch the Lego Batman in any way. So
Oh
if that
yeah.
needs to be our salvation, then Lego Batman will be it.
I mean, Will Arnett's fantastic. And, it just looks really good.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not like the only Batman that's out is also good. You know.
Because it's that thing of what Schumacher could have been. It's the satire. It's the joke.
Right. Exactly.
But I think on some, like, just from the Lego movie, like if you put up like Batfleck versus Lego Batman, I think I like Lego Batman more.
Right.
All right. So I was worried that we were going to get about a half hour to 45 minutes of material in. It's now been almost 2 hours. So I
Yes.
feel like it's a good time to wrap up.
I think so.
Do you have any kind of final Batman thoughts you want to share? Without taking 2 more hours?
No. I
right.
just really wanted to say I'm Batman again, but
Well done. Well done. I'd put, you're not quite Keaton, but that's a lot better than Kilmer or Clooney. So.
Oh, thank you. A low bar to clear.
So where can if listeners want to know more about you and your writing and what you're up to, where can they find your stuff?
That's a good question. So for poker stuff, you can go to pokerisaskill.com. And I've got, poker books that I've written there, and maybe there'll be some articles and whatnot, videos. As far as fiction goes, you can just search for Paul Christopher Hoppe fiction and find it various places. It's on leanpub.com, and I've got stuff on Amazon. And then my personal website is zenmadman.com. So that's where I write random thoughts and other stuff.
Cool. Well, thank you. And again, I'm Matthew. I'm the primary author of the Superhero Ethics blog, which you can find at superheroethics.com. And we discuss issues like some of the stuff that was talked about in terms of like some ethical or moral questions that are brought up by superhero stuff, but then also anything related, science fiction, fantasy, pretty much anything geeky that makes you think. That's what we're going to talk about. So, Paul, thank you again for spending some time with us, and thank you to all our listeners, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.